In the previous part of the course, we looked at how to measure productivity both by GVA per hour and GVA per job in different sectors.
But this only tells us so much, and leaves us wanting to know why productivity is what it is, why it's increasing or decreasing, and why it's more or less than other places.
We need to look at some key productivity indicators to get a more rounded view of productivity. These indicators are all measures which should be included in an evidence base for the local industrial strategy. These are employment breakdown, employment specialisation, business base, and earnings.
The employment breakdown of the economy gives a simple breakdown of the sectors in your area. This helps you understand how much of the work being done in your economy is being done in more or less productive sectors. It can also shape thinking around where interventions will make the most impact.
It should be noted that there are a couple of drawbacks to this data. Firstly, the Business Register and Employment Survey, or BRES, is survey-based like much data, which means sometimes figures can vary quite widely over time. Smaller companies are not always picked up by BRES. This means in particularly innovative economies where lots of small businesses are starting up, growth in employment may be understated.
Secondly, the categories of jobs as expressed in the Standard Industrial Classification, or SIC codes, do not fully reflect the modern economy. There are 30 subcategories for different types of food manufacturing, but as yet no category for artificial intelligence. This means that in some of the more specialised parts of the economy, which might be of interest for the local industrial strategy, bespoke analysis might be needed. Nonetheless, BRES is still an important and useful data set for understanding employment in specific sectors locally.
To access data about the employment breakdown in the local economy, we again need to use the NOMIS portal. We will not cover this again as we've already demonstrated this in the previous part of the module. However, it is possible to drill down below the broad industrial groupings we saw there to more detailed categories of jobs. You can do this by selecting Industry on the left-hand side whilst you've accessed the BRES data through NOMIS. This will then allow you to choose different levels of sector detail, from broad industrial groups through the SIC5 level, the most detailed level of data on individual subsectors.
When you have this data, you need to think about how best to present it. There are many good ways to show this sort of data. You could create a pie chart for your area, or show a comparison to Great Britain.
Or a tree diagram showing the sectoral composition of your area as a proportional area chart. Both of these are available in Microsoft Excel under the Insert Charts tab.
Data around the number of jobs in different sectors is very useful for understanding where people are working in the local economy, but it doesn't tell us anything about whether one sector or another is a particular specialism. Identifying economic specialisms will help you see where you have a comparative advantage against other places. It will also give clues as to which types of businesses are clustering in the area, and where there may be the greatest opportunity to become a national leader in a certain area.
We calculate specialisms using location quotients, or LQs. The LQ shows the ratio between the proportion of an area's employment, which sits in a certain sector, and the proportion of a wider area's employment in that sector. We normally use Great Britain as the wider area because, as before, BRES doesn't provide detailed employment data for Northern Ireland. So, for example, if 20% of a LEP area's employment is based in construction compared to 20% nationwide, the LQ is 20 divided by 20, which is 1. The area is neither specialised or unspecialised. It's exactly in line with the national picture.
Now, let's keep the national figure the same, but suppose now that only 10% of the LEP area's employment is in construction. The LQ is now 10 divided by 20, a half. In this case, the LEP area would not be a specialist in construction. Any LQ scores of less than 1 show the LEP area is not specialised in that sector. On the other hand, let's suppose that 40% of the LEP's employment was in construction. The LQ now becomes 40 over 20, 2. This would clearly show that the LEP area was specialised in this sector, as it has twice the number of jobs as a proportion of total employment. Any LQ values over 1 demonstrate a specialism, and the higher the LQ is, the more specialised that sector is.
Now let's show you how you do this in practice. As before, you download the figures from BRES. We recommend that you use the 2-digit division of the Standard Industrial Classification and, as before, use employment rather than employees.
Look at this example data for Sunderland and Great Britain. We've downloaded data for all the SIC2 codes. To work out the LQs, we first start by calculating the percentages of the Sunderland employment that are within different sectors by dividing each by the total. While you can get BRES to download percentages for you alongside the employment counts, this will introduce rounding errors into the calculation, so it's best to do it yourself. Then we do the same for Great Britain.
Finally, to get the LQs, we divide the Sunderland percentages by the Great Britain percentages. Remember, any values over 1 indicate a specialism. A quick look shows that the top specialism is in the manufacture of motor vehicles. Electricity and waste management also jump out as specialist sectors, and there are many others.
Once this has been calculated, there are a few ways to present it. It's often helpful to present LQs alongside the number of jobs in the sector to show both the specialism and size of the sector. You may also want to show how the LQ has changed over a time period, such as 5 years, to indicate whether the area is becoming increasingly specialised in that sector.
One simple way to display this would be a table. Bubble charts are also effective here as they communicate a lot of information clearly. In this example, the position of the bubble relative to the y-axis shows how specialist it is. The position relative to the x-axis shows how the LQ has changed. The size of the bubble indicates how many people are employed in that sector, and the colour denotes a broader sector group.
Next, we can look at the business base of the economy. This is helpful for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's an indicator of the health of the economy. Enterprise is often considered one of the 4 factors of production, alongside land, labour and capital. An economy that is enterprising will see higher levels of businesses being set up. It may also see higher levels of business deaths. This creative destruction can be a sign of risk-taking and dynamism, and shouldn't be seen automatically as a negative.
We can also get a sense of the sizes of businesses in the area and examine this by sector. A business's size can be a factor in its productivity, and it will be helpful to know whether any employment growth is driven by increasing numbers of large or small businesses.
To get the data for business births, deaths and survival rates, we need to use a dataset by the ONS called Business Demography. You'll find a link in the references attached to this video.
This dataset contains numbers for business births, business deaths, active businesses and business survival rates in every local authority. Values for LEPs can be found by aggregating, though it is helpful to see what's going on at the local authority level too. The total number of businesses which have been born or have died is useful information, but to compare with other places, it is best to present these as rates by dividing births or deaths by the number of active businesses in that year and multiplying by 1,000. This gives business births or deaths per 1,000 active businesses.
For the breakdown of businesses by size, we can again use NOMIS. But this time, instead of looking at BRES, we want to look at UK business counts. Here we can select geography and time period in much the same way and use employment size band to give a breakdown of micro, small, medium and large businesses. You can also opt for an industry breakdown. You probably wouldn't want to do this for every sector, but if there was a particular sector of interest to you, this could be a good option.
To present the births and deaths data, a simple line chart can be helpful to show a comparison. As in this example, the birth rate has been higher than the death rate for most of the period. We can be confident that the total number of businesses has increased.
Survival rates can also be effectively shown with a line chart, which is helpful for comparison between places.
Finally, for the business counts data, we can either use a table, which includes the shares of different size businesses and how they have grown or shrunk over time. Another alternative is to use a donut chart, as shown here.
Our last indicator is earnings. We want to look at earnings because, firstly, they're an important indicator of productivity. When employees are working more productively, then, in general, they should be able to command higher wages. A low-wage economy is indicative of a productivity problem.
Secondly, though, earnings are very important for people's quality of life. Those who earn more can enjoy greater financial stability, afford to work fewer hours, and consume more. Improving living standards is a key goal of the industrial strategy.
Earnings data can once again be accessed through NOMIS. This gives earnings at different points in the earnings distribution. This time we want to use the dataset Annual Survey of Hours and Earnings. You'll see there are two options: resident analysis or workplace analysis. Which you choose depends on what you're interested in. If you want to focus on the productivity of local businesses in your area, you should choose workplace analysis, as this will show what your local businesses are paying workers, and that reflects on the productivity of those businesses. If you're more interested in the quality of life of those living in your area, you should choose resident analysis. For now, we'll pick workplace analysis.
As before, you can pick geographies and the year you want data for. It's also possible to break down data by gross and total pay and by different work characteristics such as sex and whether they work full-time or part-time. Under variable, we can pick which slices of the income distribution we want.
Once you've downloaded this data, you can compare different wage rates to other places or the UK as a whole.
To present this data, a chart which shows wages at different levels of the earnings distribution will give a clear presentation of earnings across your area. Please bear in mind that if you choose to show how earnings are changing over time, you will need to use a deflator in a manner similar to how we deflated the GVA figures. Though please note, where we are interested in what earnings tell us about quality of life, an index which captures the impacts of inflation on people's lives, such as the Consumer Price Index, may be more appropriate.
Congratulations, you've reached the end of this module. You should now be well prepared to access the data you need to understand productivity in your area and know how you can turn this into insights which are the starting point for the local industrial strategy. To access further resources to support you in the development of your LIS, visit www.local.gov.uk/local-industrial-strategies.